It's a great rental strategy. Like, honestly, it can be very secure. And once it's established, like I would say it's one of the more like hands-off types of portfolios you can build. What is going on, guys? Welcome to today's episode of the Collecting Keys Real Estate Investing podcast. This is the show we teach you to make massive income, not just passive income with your real estate investing business. If this is your first time here, I am Mike DeHaan here with Dan Austin and Dylan Cook. And we're still working on our intro because this is the third one with Dylan. And, we did just me and Dan for like 300 episodes. And so now I guess this is the 3 more white dudes talking about real estate show. So we'll lean on that until it stops being entertaining to only me and nobody else. But right on, guys. I appreciate you guys holding down the fort last week while I was out and you guys had the D&D show. I was out in Las Vegas at the little Alex Hermosi scaling workshop for acquisition.com. I'm not going to dive too much into details on all that stuff because I recorded 2 Friday focuses where I kind of went into detail on the 2 days that we covered there. One came out last week. The other one's coming out. I guess they both, when this one comes out, will come out the past 2 Fridays. So you can check out those, deep dive into the 2 days that were that took place there. And it was great overall. It's completely kind of fundamentally changed my views on our business and what we're planning to do. I know Dan's felt the impact of that as I came back and scrambled up a bunch of shit, fired a handful of people. We revamped our organizational structure and sort of like our hierarchy a little bit. But overall, I don't know, Dan, first week I think has been super, super impactful. I don't know what your thoughts are.
Yeah, it's been going well. I would say things are, it's always good to get a fresh set of eyes on things and move things around. And, as you get into the monotony of a business, like things just kind of like grow legs and start walking around and not doing everything you think they would do. And then you also recognize like you need that awakening to be like, you know what, we don't really need those people. And yeah, Mike and I are famous for that.
Yeah. I mean, this is the third event that one of us has gone to where we've come back and fired somebody within 48 hours.
I know. Our team should be super afraid from be around us for give us like 2 weeks, like just go on vacation for 2 weeks when we come back and maybe you'll survive.
Yeah. In fact, we've had a lot. If I'm looking back to, our third partner that we fired years ago to when we got rid of our client manager to now we got rid of 2 of our other partners. And
we're really, just so you guys know, like everybody asks Mike and I for advice on like how to be partners. Like we're really good partners together, but don't try to partner with us because they never last.
I don't think this is boding well for me.
Get out of here, Dylan.
Yeah. So anyways, so what do we got going on in real estate this week, Dylan? I know you sent over a couple notes in our Slack channel. I guess the number one thing that's top of, I would say, the industry as a whole, and you've done a big deep dive into, is South Carolina and the ban on wholesaling.
Yeah, no, I think that's probably kind of catching the industry by storm. Been a lot of headlines. It's all over the Bigger Pockets forums and other. I even got brought up in my local real estate event that we had here yesterday too, and how it's going to affect everything. So I listened to a couple podcasts today, did some of my own research. And basically what this boils down to is the way that South Carolina's law is currently written is it pretty much does ban wholesaling if you take the letter to the word, the definition. And they go into that and they say that wholesaling is like comprised of 4 things. It's basically a contract for real property, marketing or advertising that property, the process of assigning that property, and then making a profit. Right. Okay. And so
like literally every step of the entire.
Yeah. Right. But their biggest grievances that they pointed out was 1, transparency to the seller, was 2, but then the marketing part is basically they say if you are marketing any kind of a real property, then that is considered acting as a real estate agent and you should have a real estate license. And gotcha. The back and forth is, well, I'm not marketing the property. I am marketing the contract to said property. Right. Sure. But it's like the legalese, the way it's written is basically says like, if real property is tied to the contract, then it's still illegal. Right. So there's really not a loophole that you can go around it. Mm-hmm. So there's more to this. What's your initial thoughts with you guys? Well, I think you even operate in that market right now.
We do. So I guess just to clarify, when you say marketing, you're talking about marketing to find a buyer, not marketing.
That is correct. Yeah. Right. So you have the property under contract to assign, and these are your investor lifts. But the the caveat here, not to dive too deep into it, is what if I just said it to Mike or to Dan? Like, what if you already knew the buyer previously? That's not technically marketing the property because I already knew who I was going to give it to. That is not illegal. The illegal part is the marketing part.
So and like you could just JV, like, which we do a lot of times on our exit, right? So you can say, well, it's not just me, it's this other person I'm going to JV this deal with.
Exactly. And was there a difference between marketing to sell the property and marketing to say, like, find an investor who's going to do that deal with you? And then part of your JV agreement is that they're going to pay you X amount of money in exchange for title.
So JVing is one of their like things at the end to try to get around it. But like land contracts, installment contracts, where you have equitable interest from a down payment, not just the rights to the property. Well, and then you have it on a 2-week timeline or whatever that may be, and then you just close it out 2 weeks after that. So
I was gonna say, like, what about like a lease option, right?
Exactly, same thing.
Agree to same thing. Yeah. I mean, it's obviously investor lift still works there. We have 2 deals on there right now. It's not like when they decided to ban Pornhub in Texas and they like blocked the IP, right? You can still, you can still use all the standard processes that are there. And I guess our workaround right now. So we currently have 3 properties under contract. They're in escrow that are all being assigned. And our workaround is that our attorney is a wholesaler. And so he's like, I don't care about these stupid rules. It's in his best interest to just keep doing deals. And one of our deals, he even found the buyer for us. So I'm not going to say who that is.
Yeah, no shit.
His name is under wraps. So if you DM me asking who it is, tough shit, you better go find him yourself. But
the weird thing I think they're trying to get at is like, what precedent is this going to set? Like, is this going to be a sweeping over the entire 50 states? And the attorney that they interviewed on said podcast was like, yeah, I think this is going to be like the playbook for the rest of the states. And so how's this going to affect the industry? Are people going to leave? But he was very pro Copless and said, hey, these are times where if you're a good business owner, you will adapt and just find out a way to win. But you guys are going to love this next part of how this even came to be. Was, I guess, in 2021, some wholesaler who didn't know what he was doing was trying to wholesale a deal that was on the MLS.
Nice.
Screwed an agent out of their commission. And because they had a listing agreement, they went around that, closed the deal anyway. And the listing agent is the one that reported this to like the board of realtors, whoever is supposed to. And that's what kicked off kind of this whole escalating of events.
That smells a lot like the most ethical wholesaler of all time.
Manji
and his cohort, Pace Morby.
Yeah, right. Well, so it's funny though, you make that reference, Dan. That is how all these things always start though, right? Is it's like,
well, that's
one
what
person
Keegley's
comes
doing,
out,
right? They're trying to wholesale contracts on the MLS.
That's literally Keegley's whole model with their franchise. But also too, like all these things always start with like that one situation that just for some reason decided to, tip everything over and they make an example of it. And the immediate thing I think of is how long till this happens with, say, like subject to properties. Like we've talked about forever, where there's going to be a fund manager or a note servicing company or somebody that goes, you know what, you could get a shit ton more yield on this money if you stopped, started calling these loans due. And then next thing you know, there's a sweeping legislation that completely just like
totally
clamps
changes
down on that.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, it's kind of, I feel like a good chunk of this regulation could be resolved with a bit of regulation that talks about transparency and clarity to the seller. Like that's fair, right? As you get better and more experienced at this business, you talking to the seller about what your process is and what you're actually going to do with the property becomes of a hell of a lot more common and a lot easier because you gain that experience and understanding and confidence, right? Well, and I remember this, I don't know how you were, Dylan, but when Mike and I first started, like you're kind of like walking on eggshells. Like, what do you say to the seller? And it's not always quite apparent that you should just tell the seller you're going to sell their property and make 20 grand on a quick wholesale fee. Like that doesn't come off right. That doesn't feel good. But I do think that some level of transparency would A, help the sellers out, and B, get rid of some of these dorks that are just doing crazy, shady bullshit.
Yeah.
Or at least have the capability to close on it. Like a lot of these people don't have a dime, 2 dimes to run together. They're saying they're going to be full cash and like have some weird clause in their contract that says if their cat says it's not okay, like they can back out or something.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's getting out of hand when like one of the biggest, I would say, up and coming or existing pieces of this business, or like little niches. People find themselves the stupid gator lending thing, or people are like lending each other $1,000 for earnest money because they don't freaking have $1,000, but they're still signing an equitable contract that says they have $200,000 to buy a home. It's like, come on, that's ridiculous. That shouldn't happen.
Yeah, I will say much of this, when you actually boil it down to where issues are in this industry, and this isn't just a poke at the same guy we poke at with like Pace and Jamil and all those dudes that are also have been tied into bigger pockets and done all this stuff. They're the ones that have been teaching and coaching people the no money down real estate, which gets people in here that have to like wholesale their car just to make money to pay for his course. Like, you know what I mean? Like they're doing weird shit, right? They don't have like, and they get out there and they do crazy, weird, shady shit that is not in the best interest of the seller or anybody in general. And then it does create problems for people. So, and then regulation.
If you're new, right, and you're hearing this, you're like, oh shit, I don't know what to do. Like even one of the workarounds they talked about here is try the reverse wholesaling thing. Go to a guy that you know that buys in your market and say, what are you looking to buy? And then just find him the property. Then you're not doing anything illegal because you're not marketing real property. You already know who the buyer is going to be. Right. And then you can get a couple of assignment fees under your belt and get some money. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Here's the thing. If you don't have any money to buy real estate, there's really 3 places you should look. Okay. Like you have zero money. You should look at Indeed, LinkedIn, Wise Hire. Go get a freaking job and save some money. And then you can start and make these investments. Investments are things that you do when you have cash, right? You can start a business, a lot of different ways that you can create, cash flow and bring in income that are not, kind of negligent or not taking advantage of people. And I don't know, whenever they make these different sort of legislation changes to wholesaling, I don't really get too phased. Honestly, like, it to me, it's kind of similar to when people get super upset about like anti-landlord laws in certain states. I say this as somebody who has almost my entire portfolio in a very liberal state. It's really not that bad. You just need to follow the rules. And like, honestly, if you do follow the rules, they make it pretty mutually beneficial, like overall. But it's for some reason, they always feel like they can only be successful if they can just like cowboy shit, but that's not how anything works.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Like the challenge becomes not like whether you can or can't wholesale. It's whether let's say how do you do it within the policies and the regulations of the state that you're operating in. Like we have in here in our notes, like Illinois has a $20,000 fine if you wholesale or whatever the rule is about wholesaling. I guarantee you there's investors and they're still operating and working. You just have to figure out what that means and how do you do that. And I will say that me personally, as you operate, as it gets trickier and trickier, and if you have to step through some more hoops, the more you need to lean on like being professional and getting your like letting the seller know what's going on.
Yeah, exactly.
Me too, like is with the South Carolina thing. I think you just touched on Denton. Sorry if I'm repeating myself, but what is the fine if it or who's policing it? Like if the title companies are doing it and it's a $500 fine, then no one's going to stop.
Exactly. And we talked about that a little bit on our scale coaching call earlier today is, so our attorney is also a wholesaler. Also too, the fines from what I've seen on this are not very big. I think the first time is like $500. What is in the attorney and closer's best interest? Honestly, is it to snitch on you or is it just to keep doing transactions and make several $1,000s every transaction that you bring back? Like they have no incentive to actually do anything about it.
I mean, unless like the state bar gets involved, right? Just like a real estate, like the 2 things that would scare me would be the state bar if I was an attorney or the real estate commission if I was a real estate agent and cared about having my license, right? Because those are the 2 people that can totally bone you out of your career if that is your main source of income. But I think it kind of goes back to like, we operate this way all the time. Like we've gone to plenty of title companies and attorneys in town, right, Mike? And they're just like, no, we don't do assignments.
All the time.
Like, okay, we're going to go find someone that does. And sometimes that person we do assignments with for 2 years is great. And then they suck and we find somebody else. Some attorneys won't do novations. Some attorneys won't do sub 2 or wraps. You just have to work and find the ones that are willing to take on that risk because they feel like their interpretation of a law, which is what law is usually, right, is an interpretation until there's some sort of precedent set, which even then it's up to interpretation. But that's that you got to find somebody that is going to work within that policy for that will help you still be able to, in quotations, wholesale or whatever that means.
Yeah, totally. And I don't know. when every door closes, more will open. I would love if it just like weeded out all of the, I would say like the weak hands. Every time there's something that just sort of weeds people out as established operators, I'm pretty confident we can figure it out.
Yeah, no, that's the only last thing they said was like, get rid of all the bad actors, the ones that have come in because it's gotten so popular lately and do treat people like crap, and then it'll probably be better for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep. So
yeah, I think that's a fair way to look at it. But I think there's still a lot of dirtbags out there. Is that something else we're going to talk about?
Yeah, that's a good segue, Dan. So yeah. So what was this? What is the deal with this guy that you sent over to me on Instagram? Because I had never seen him before, but he's huge. He has a huge
and I didn't know who it was either. And then it popped up on just like my algorithm, right? And so his name's Thomas Cruz. And he has this Instagram handle of just T Cruz NC on here, and title is Section 8 Real Estate Investor. Learn how to buy houses with 2,500 down. And then he's of course selling some kind of webinar on here too. But he posted a story that caught my attention. It says, I make an extra $45,000 per month renting luxury amenities to his clients. And I'm going to play this for the audience, but keep in mind, like this whole time I'm thinking like this is satire. Or like he's like going to say just kidding at the end. And he never does. So just take a listen.
Yeah, we'll see if we can hear it. If we can't, Max, we'll send you the video.
Section 8 tenants as they pay those rents on luxury amenities, such as $25 per month for ceiling fans, $40 per month for food disposals, $100 a month for a dishwasher, $50 per month for a washer or dryer, storm doors, screen doors. Doesn't matter what it is. As long as that luxury amenity is not required by the Section 8 program and does not have to pass by Section 8 inspection, you can add it to the lease and tenants can pay that if they agree to it before they start. Now, let's say they rent one of my ceiling fans for $25 per month and they stop making payments on it. They have a few options. One, my associate named Roger can go into the property during an inspection and remove that fan from the ceiling.
He goes on a little bit, but literally,
give me my ceiling fan back.
Like I was in disbelief for a while. I literally couldn't believe that. One, he charges extra for things like ceiling fans from probably the economically challenged, and then two, he actually take out a ceiling fan if someone's not paying $25 a month.
That's crazy. I mean, it's like the landlord version of people that like lease furniture, at like 17% interest. You see those companies.
Get your rent to own furniture.
You rent to own furniture. I mean, like, I have a lot of problems with it ethically. Like, is there like business rules around that?
Actually, it's funny you mentioned that, Mike. And here in my market, you can't even have like sub agreements with tenants. Like your CMHA rent, your Section 8 rent is what you get. There's no like they pay extra outside of whatever. So
I guess I have a couple comments to make. One is it possible? I don't believe so because I don't think we have it here. Is it possible that under the Section 8 guidelines, a tenant would be afforded more income or like more Section 8 funding for these amenities?
I don't think
right. Our Section 8, like our housing authority locally, because they're like a local authority, will basically do a comp and they'll say you are allowed to get this much rent for that property based on whatever comping that they do for rental. And that's it. Like you can't this one has air conditioning, you know what I mean? Like you can't do that. I understand this guy's business purpose and it makes sense. And I think on a more ethical level, one of the things that I heard one of the big apartment owners here in town doing was he rents for $25 a month a air conditioning unit. Because most apartments have like the small like air conditioning units, right? And when he built all these apartments, he puts in a space for the unit, but then you don't get it unless you pay $25 a month for that, and then they put it in. To me, that's reasonable. We live in a climate where air conditioning isn't, you don't have to have it, but maybe 2 months out of the year, if that, you know what I mean? Like you could survive. I've survived. That to me is a great way to increase your NOI. But when you talk about trying to charge Section 8 people all this extra money for all this bullshit, and then you take it out, things that would be considered, I think the ethical issue here that I have, they're pretty much the things that would be considered somewhat standard. You know what I mean? Standard applications, like a ceiling fan. Come on. I mean, granted, I don't put any of that. Window screens like that to me is like, come on, man. Like that's crazy.
Insane.
Yeah, storm door.
That's storm door. Yeah. Like this all sorts of stuff. And I know too, and I went to that rabbit hole. I see you had your notes here. He talked about how he just gets like these shitty ones that he buys from like used stores for like $10 and then sells them at $25 a month indefinitely to these people.
I mean, no one's refuting the math.
But
I'm just refuting this person, like them being a person.
The ethics of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so
and
now
why
here's
are you
where
putting that on the internet?
Yeah.
You know?
Well, because the thing that was honestly really disgusting about that to me was like how there was people that were in the comments that were like, it's fucking awesome. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm like,
that is bad.
You're the worst kind of people in society.
Well, you already said how landlord.
and
if you put landlord anywhere on social media, you are the devil, right? And then you have people out here saying this kind of shit. Well, no wonder they think like that, right? Like,
yeah,
for sure. It's crazy.
Well, here's where the real hypocrisy would come though. So let's say that one of those tenants goes and buys a $15 ceiling fan and installs it. Do you think he'd allow that?
No, actually, I watched a lot of these because he said that.
Yeah.
I think it's the most recent one. He says he will go in and remove their ceiling fan. It's in his lease.
See, that's fucked. See, that is a bad person. That is a horrible human being.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And another one on there, he basically admitted to like insurance fraud. He said that one of his tenants poured liquid cement down his toilet during one of the rentals. And so he paid a plumber, I don't know, $3,000 to like fix everything. Right. But then his plumber is a friend of his and they filed like $20,000 for the insurance company to fix everything.
Yeah.
You should not put that stuff on the internet. I mean, you shouldn't do it, but you shouldn't put it on the internet for everybody to see. And I have literally never had a tenant do that because I'm not an asshole. Like I'm not trying to take advantage of my tenants so that they don't pour liquid cement down. I mean, I don't know what the worst thing was happened that we've had, Mike. I mean, I haven't had really anything that's been like that. And we have Section 8 tenants. Yeah. We have, higher income, lower income, medium income. We have it all.
I'm trying to think of if we've actually ever had tenants do anything malicious. Like, honestly, I think the only one that we've really had was that deal where we rented it back to the owners after we bought it, and they were like basically decided they were going to screw us over, even though we were perfectly professional about the situation.
We did everything we did everything we said we would do. They just they had ill intentions from the beginning.
They did, for sure. Like that was the only one, but like the tenancy never an issue. I mean, we have several Section 8 units.
So do we too. And I think they're fit within a portfolio, right? Like
they're great.
Yeah. Honestly. When you go into recession, our biggest risk is our tenants lose their jobs and they can't pay rent. Right. Well, it's Section 8. I mean, it's pretty much guaranteed income.
Totally.
Yeah. Well, this kind of goes back to what we were talking about with, like the wholesaling stuff, and where people tend to get really weird is when there are extra rules and all of a sudden they can't, just like cowboy shit. Section 8 tenants are actually awesome. And what people don't realize is that there's like a bunch of initial hoops that you have to hop through, which are super freaking annoying. They're take a long time.
Challenging, super challenging. You got to have you got to do your due diligence on the process.
Totally. And they always have like weird deadlines, at least up here in Washington they do, where like if you miss the deadline, they're like, well, I guess you got to wait until next year to, get market rent. And then you got to carry it for a year.
In Spokane, you're not allowed to call them. They only do email and you can't go into the office.
Yeah.
Try getting Section 8 for a deaf lady who can't call them and can't go into the office. It's crazy. Like ours is kind of odd.
I think they're all in the Stone Age though. Like ours here, you can't email them anything. It has to be a fax or you have to physically drop them off. And so I went to, and their packets are huge. Like,
Yeah. Well, they're kind of like that on purpose because if it was super easy, everyone would do it and it would take a huge chunk out of the budget. The government tries not to spend money. It doesn't have to on things like that. They would rather spend money they don't need to on, other bullshit. But also too, if you think about it, how when you start to get tenants, everyone has this tenant where you're like, God, they keep texting me all the time. They're a pain in my ass. Now imagine that, but you only have the bad tenants that text you all the time. That's their entire client base. And so they have to make it intentionally very challenging. Otherwise they would never do anything.
One thing that they implemented here that I liked was like, so once as a tenant, like from their perspective, once you get like, they call it a voucher, you don't want to lose it. If you lose it, like you're like banned from. So like they will actually usually keep your place pretty nice to avoid an eviction because if you get evicted, you lose that voucher. So they're not getting any kind of subsidized housing forever if they lose that. Right. So they actually tend to be decent tenants.
Yeah. And long lasting tenants, because that's one thing you can't really, you can quantify it, but if somebody stays there for 5, 6, 7 years, that's going to be so much cheaper, even if you're below market rent, which the great thing about Section 8 is you get market rent. Like it's not like you're making less money than you would, because it is based on what the market is renting for. The difference is a portion of it's getting paid by the housing authority, whether it's 100% of it or it's income based. So it might vary. It does vary. And so like, we have Section 8 tenants that I don't know how long they've been in there, but I'm like, man, I don't want them ever to move out.
Yeah.
And every year I email the housing authority, our property manager does now, and says, hey, rent's now $1,300. And they're like, okay, approved. And they stay there. It doesn't affect them as for the tenants. The income or the rent going up doesn't affect them one bit.
Yeah. And also too, people, rip on the blue government stuff, but if they have a pretty established like Section 8, sort of system, or like a rental, like a renter sort of system that provide assistance for different things. A lot of times, if you have a renter that falls on hard times, like I've had this happen before up here, and all of a sudden is unable to pay rent for whatever reason or whatever period of time, and then they are willing to work with you as the landlord to go through this process to become a Section 8 tenant, the city very often, as long as you weren't a dirtbag, you weren't violating the lease rules, your property's in good condition, you weren't threatening them or doing weird stuff, they will actually pay your back rent. I had this a little while ago. I got a $14,000 check from the city, right? It took me almost a year to go through this process with this lady, of which I had to let her live through that, live in it through that period of time.
Oh, you had to let her live? That was nice of you.
yeah. I had to let her. Yeah, I did. Unfortunately, there was those times, especially she was kind of.
Was this the one that said she had cancer that maybe actually did?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah. She did all sorts of weird shit. I played the game. She went through the process. I got all of my rent recovered, and then she moved out anyway. So it's perfect. But point being is it's a great rental strategy. Like, honestly, it can be very secure. And once it's established, I would say it's one of the more hands-off types of portfolios you can build until you have a turnover. As soon as you have a turnover, you can guarantee the place is going to be trashed 95% of the time.
Well, my biggest gripe with that is, you have the inspection to come back out. This actually happened to me where one inspector came out. He's like, hey, you just got to fix these things. It was like a smoke detector or some other shit. It was something super small.
Yeah.
I was like, all right, fine. It took 3 weeks for another inspector to come back out. Comes back. He's like, and we fixed the things that they did. It was like, oh, well, now it's a different person. It's like, oh, now you got to do X, Y, and Z. I'm like, why didn't they tell me that the first time? Right. And so it's just
that's
ongoing
a bit
thing.
unfair. Yeah. Yeah. That is a bit unfair. I mean, it's kind of crappy.
Because I feel like inspectors always need to find something to justify their existence. If they don't find anything, they're like,
that's for residential too. I mean, that's not just CMHA.
Yeah. It's for everything.
That's everything.
I mean,
totally.
It's just every kind of inspection, every industry. You go find a pest inspector. They're going to find somewhere that you're going to have some sort of pest in your house because that's their job.
If we're good with that, I got one other thing that just reminded me of.
Sure.
I posted in our Slack channel for the Scale community the hard lessons thing about this house I've owned for a long time. We had an inspection, and the guy was like, the inspector found all kinds of things wrong with this house. And keep in mind, we did this place up nice. And the biggest thing that was scaring away the potential buyers was he said there was still foundation problems. I was like, there's not. We fixed it. But they're first-time home buyers, so of course they want to double check. And I had to spend $500 essentially for a structural engineer to come out there to say, to prove that there's nothing wrong, even though I knew nothing was wrong. To your point of, they always find something, right?
They have to.
They do always find something.
Well, that's where there's the old house flipper knowledge of you always leave a little something, you don't put you only put the railing on one side of the stairs, you don't attach the dishwasher to the underside of the
GFCI outlet is an easy one. The rib plumbing underneath the sinks. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We had a freaking inspector one time. Everything he would say, he'd always say there's a gas leak. And it got to the point to where it was like, come on, dude. Cause people are like, we need the furnace replaced. I'm like, there's no gas leak. Come on. You would have the gas furnace guy come out and be like, bro, there's no gas leak here. But whatever tool he had always. And I'm like, bro, dude, I'm referring you to my buyers, not so you will screw me over, dude. Chill out. And you don't have to find something.
Oh, dude, they always get crooked. The first house actually I ever lost on, this was years ago, it was an older house up on the South Hill here. It had this huge basement. They came back and basically there was this huge issue with radon basically, and radon
That's a big
seeping into
one.
the house. And it was like, oh, you need to get a whole radon mitigation system figured out. And it, like, I was curious, looked up, got a quote, $28,000.
No way.
I'm like, well, I'm not doing that. Then I found out this dude's dad owns a radon mitigation company. I'm like, come on, that's like,
Dude,
that's
you
crooked
should
as
not
hell.
pay more than
Also,
$2,000
also
for like a full radon mitigation system.
It was insanely expensive. And then also too, I looked it up and like, it's not even a real thing. Like there's no like proven evidence that it's like dangerous. And the people be like, if you're exposed to it for over 30 years, like you can have health problems. Yeah. Same with being outside where there's just air pollution.
Yeah.
Like, Jesus.
Yeah.
But so how'd you end up doing with this house though? So I think you mentioned it briefly a couple weeks ago. So the note say you owned it for 355 days, which is really fun. Do you have a hard money loan that was
private money?
On that,
but luckily,
why didn't you just let it go 9 days? You should have gone 9 days more and gotten long-term capital gains, dog.
Ooh.
Dude, I wanted it gone so bad. And plus, I think they still tax it as a flip, right? It was never a rental, so I don't think that changes anything.
Yeah, that's. You still owned it. You probably could have got. It wouldn't have saved you much. You're right.
So, I mean, at this point, I made like 15,000, which I was happy with after it was all said and done.
That's
the biggest thing, and how I put in here is like, because it tied up most of my liquidity, I got a lot of that back. So that affected my marketing going forward. It affected my aggressiveness going towards after extra deals, and just like being able to sleep at night, bro. Like I didn't know when this thing was gonna sell. So that's a chapter behind me. Hard lesson learned. Good thing to share with the community, and hopefully everyone can learn a couple lessons. So.
Yeah, well, congrats, man. I'm glad you got out of it. That's
a long time to own a flip and still make money. Like you just don't you feel fortunate. But yeah, that is a good thing. Like Mike and I have definitely had that. Usually we don't get our money back in the whole piece that we thought we would. But either way, even if you're losing money, you're just like, thank God I'm going to get. And it's usually on the big ones. It's never like where you're like, oh, I got 30 grand tied up into it. I don't care. It's usually when you have $150,000-$200,000 tied up and you're like, I like that money.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if I wasn't doing deals during this time, or this was the first deal I ever did, I would have been in trouble. Like, not gonna lie. Like totally. You can go, like, what does Brandon Turner say? You can go broke buying good deals. Not saying this is a good deal because I still made money, but if this was my first deal ever, I don't know if I'd be here today.
Yep.
Yeah. And this is a big thing that I'm always preaching. Like, don't buy stuff like early in your real estate career. Like don't buy anything that's like complicated or big or expensive or in the A class. Just do C class stuff, wholesale, build that cash sort of basis, right? Do like super simple flips. Definitely don't buy any rentals because it completely just handicaps like the opportunity that you have over the short term and then ultimately the long term. I mean, that got Dan and I, the first thing that we did when we started working together was we bought this shitty duplex that is a great property, but man, we could have acquired so much more in like the 9 months it took us to do that freaking thing. Yep. Right. Or like if you'd bought this one, Dylan, as like your very first deal, you probably wouldn't be in the business anymore.
No, I 100% agree.
Honestly. Yeah. So
yeah, it slows you down too much. I mean, and you have like Mike and I's goal was to buy rental properties when we got into this. And I think that's what a lot of people's thing is. It's I want to buy rental properties. That's why they get in it because they see the passive income, all that sort of stuff. But that will slow you down too much. You got to create that income and you have to learn how to make consistent income out of your business before you do that. And that's just us looking back and saying, man, if we didn't do that duplex for the 9 months, we would have learned how to make money. We'd have probably made multiple six figures beyond what we did that year. And we still had a ton of opportunity to buy good deals. That's the cool thing about this business is you will always find good deals. Like that's just how we do it. The marketing, that's how it all works. The systems work. And so you'll be better off in the future to buy.
What's worse is I probably could have wholesaled this and made $30K 11 months ago. Right.
Yeah. Right. And you made 15K.
If you count up because I went to this property frequently, it's only like 10 minutes from my house. So like the amount of time I spent versus that profit is pennies. Like it is not a lot.
It's totally terrible. Like far less than minimum wage. Yeah. You should have instead gone and looked at LinkedIn and
luckily I was working the other times. I got a couple other deals under my belt. The only like caveat to this is I learned a shit ton with this one because it was a complete remodel. Like we raised the ceiling, we reframed the house, electric, plumbing, a pool, like so my education went up a lot, but still I would not advise that for anyone who's starting out.
Yeah, totally. It's a good way to look at it. You got an education.
Yeah, Absolutely. You know, and people chasing cash flow when they start too. Here's one thing I'm going to finish on with this. Please bring me somebody that has an impressive cash flow number that has been buying exclusively in the last like 2 to 3 years. They don't exist. They were all buying shit like 10 years ago. And when stuff was super, super cheap, and now they either refinanced in 2020, 2021. And so they, you know, have no cash in there. Cash flow is super, super strong. But people that are getting into the game since like 2022 to right now, cash flow is not the ticket at all. Just focus on making big money. That's literally why the tagline for our show is make massive income, not just passive income for your real estate business, because it's a lot easier to do. And honestly, having $10,000 a month in passive income is cool. You know what's also cool? Having like $2 million. just do that. It's significantly easier at this point. Trust me.
No.
But anyways,
I think that's exactly right.
All right, guys. Yep. So, all right, guys, I'm going to finish up there. Thanks for listening, everybody. You can follow us on social media. I'm at Mike_invest. Dan is at InvestorMan. Dan, Dylan, what's your handle?
11D Cook.
11D Cook. There we go. Choose follow, and we appreciate you guys listening. Talk to you guys next week.
See ya.